Almost nobody feels ahead financially, even the people who technically are. Quick note, not financial advice, just 7 specific verifiable signs, pulled from current national data, not vibes, that quietly put someone ahead of most people, whether or not it ever feels that way. There's a specific reason this feeling is so common. Financial progress rarely announces itself with a number flashing on a screen. It shows up as an absence, a bill that didn't spiral, a bad month that didn't turn into a bad year, and absences are notoriously hard to feel proud of because there's nothing dramatic to point at. Here's what to actually look for instead. Sign 1. The credit card gets paid off in full every single month without really thinking about it. As of the most recent data, 47% of American cardholders carry a balance from month to month, and 61% of those people have been carrying it for at least a year. Paying it off in full isn't a small habit. It's already outperforming more than half the country on the single most expensive form of everyday debt that exists. Picture the specific, almost invisible moment this happens. A card statement arrives, the full balance gets paid automatically, and the whole thing is forgotten again within the hour. There's no ceremony to it. Nobody posts about paying off a credit card bill on time. It just quietly keeps happening, month after month, while a little under half the country is doing the opposite without necessarily choosing to. A friend mentions, almost in passing, that they're still paying off a purchase from 2 Christmases ago. There's no judgment in the moment, just a small private recalibration. A quiet realization that the thing that felt unremarkable, paying a card off on time, was never actually the default setting most households are running on. Sign 2, a surprise $400 expense, a car repair, a vet bill, a broken appliance. Wouldn't require touching a credit card or borrowing from anyone. According to the Federal Reserve's most recent household survey, 63% of adults say they could cover that expense with cash on hand. That means 37% couldn't. Simply having that $400 sitting there, uncommitted to anything else, is already a real and measurable form of financial stability most households don't have. There's a specific kind of calm that comes from not needing to check an account balance before saying yes to an unexpected expense. It rarely gets noticed as a milestone because the alternative, the moment of dread before checking whether the money's actually there, is the version everyone remembers and talks about instead. The car makes a strange noise on a random Tuesday, and the response is a scheduling call to a mechanic instead of a mental scramble through which bill can wait another week. That single, boring phone call is the entire difference between the 63% and the 37%. Not a bigger income necessarily, just a specific amount of cash sitting somewhere, untouched, waiting for exactly this kind of Tuesday. Sign 3, housing costs. Rent or mortgage, plus basic utilities, stay under 30% of take-home income. About a third of all US households spend more than that on housing, a threshold the Census Bureau and housing researchers classify as cost-burdened. Staying under that number isn't just a personal preference. It's the specific line that separates a household with real financial breathing room from one where a single rent increase or repair bill turns into a crisis. A lease renewal notice arrives with a modest increase, and the math still works without requiring a lifestyle change anywhere else. That's not luck necessarily, though luck plays a role. It's also the direct result of a housing decision made earlier that left room underneath it. Room that roughly a third of households doing everything else right simply don't have. A slightly smaller apartment gets chosen over a slightly nicer one that would have pushed the number just over that 30% line, and the decision barely registers as significant at the time. Years later, that unremarkable choice is the quiet reason a rent increase is an annoyance instead of an emergency, while a neighbour in the nicer unit is renegotiating their entire budget over the same increase. Sign 4, money is actually going into some kind of retirement account, even a small amount, even inconsistently. As of the most recent labour data, 56% of US workers participate in an employer-sponsored retirement plan. That means 44% of workers, nearly half the country, have nothing at all going into retirement savings through their job. Simply being in the 56%, regardless of the balance, is already ahead of a huge share of the workforce. It doesn't feel like an achievement to have a few dollars an hour quietly diverted before a paycheck even lands in the bank. It's easy to look at a modest account balance and assume it doesn't count for much, but the comparison that actually matters isn't against some idealized number. It's against the 44% of people for whom that account doesn't exist at all. A new job's onboarding paperwork includes a single checkbox for retirement contributions, easy to skip in the rush of first-day forms. Checking it, even at some small default percentage, is the entire difference between belonging to the 56% and the 44% for the rest of that job. Nobody frames a checkbox as a financial milestone. It quietly is one anyway. Sign 5. Net worth roughly matches or beats the typical number for a given age. Current Federal Reserve data puts the typical net worth at $39,000 for households under 35, $135,600 for ages 35 to 44, $247,200 for 45 to 54, and $364,500 for 55 to 64. These numbers include everything: home equity, retirement accounts, savings, minus debt. Landing at or above the number for a given age band means outperforming at least half of every household in that same stage of life. There's a particular kind of disbelief that shows up when this comparison is actually run for the first time. Most people assume they're behind some invisible curve, mostly because financial media tends to showcase extremes in both directions, struggling further behind, or a handful of standout success stories further ahead, and rarely the actual, unremarkable median in the middle that most people are quietly living near or above. A quick, honest calculation, every account added up, every debt subtracted, takes maybe 10 minutes with a calculator and a few logged-in banking apps. Most people avoid running it, not because the math is hard, but because there's a real fear the number will confirm the worst assumption. More often than not, it confirms something closer to the middle of the pack instead. Sign 6. Retirement savings are roughly on pace with the standard benchmark of 1 times annual income by 30, 3 times by 40, 6 times by 50, 8 times by 60, and 10 times by 67. These aren't arbitrary numbers. They're built from a 15% savings rate sustained over a career, aimed at replacing about 45% of pre-retirement income. Being on pace, even loosely, means the current trajectory is actually built to reach a real retirement, not just accumulate savings in a general, undirected way. A milestone birthday passes, and out of curiosity, a quick calculation gets run. Current retirement balance divided by current salary. The number that comes back is either mildly reassuring or genuinely alarming, and either way it's more useful information than the vague sense of probably fine or probably behind that most people carry around instead of ever actually running the math. A coworker the same age mentions their own retirement balance at a work lunch, half joking, half anxious, and the instinct is to compare instantly. The actual benchmark that matters isn't that coworker's number at all. It's the age-based multiple built from real savings rate assumptions, which makes the comparison a lot less personal and a lot more useful than sizing up a colleague's account by guesswork. Sign 7. Retirement savings have never been touched early to cover a bill. In 2025, a record 6% of retirement plan participants took a hardship withdrawal from their account, the highest share ever recorded, roughly triple the rate from before the pandemic, driven mostly by the risk of eviction or foreclosure and unpaid medical bills. Never having needed to do that isn't a small thing. It means the rest of a financial life absorbed its worst years without cannibalizing the one account specifically meant to outlast a career. That 6% figure isn't a number about irresponsible people making poor choices. Most of it comes down to housing costs and medical bills, the same forces showing up again and again throughout every one of these 7 signs. Never having to make that particular withdrawal is less a reflection of willpower than of a slightly smaller pile of bad luck arriving at slightly better moments. A hardship withdrawal form sits open in a browser tab for a coworker dealing with an eviction notice, the retirement balance treated as a last resort rather than a genuine choice. Nobody in that moment is thinking about opportunity cost or lost compounding. They're thinking about staying housed this month. That context matters, and it's worth holding on to before assuming this sign is purely about better decisions. None of these 7 signs on their own means someone has made it financially, and it's worth being honest about that. A person can hit 5 of these and still feel completely behind, especially in a culture that mostly broadcasts the outliers on both ends. That feeling is real, it's just not the same thing as the actual data. Here's the thread running underneath all 7 signs. Every one of them is being compared against a real, current, measurable population of other households, not against an internet highlight reel of people further ahead. Most people quietly assume they're closer to the back of the pack than they actually are. mostly because nobody posts a video celebrating an unremarkable, on-time credit card payment or an ordinary lease renewal that didn't break the budget. Scrolling social media for even a few minutes tends to surface the exact opposite comparison set. Vacations, new cars, renovated kitchens, all curated and posted by definition, while an on-time credit card payment and a boring lease renewal never make anyone's feed. The 7 signs in this video were never designed to be posted about. That's not a flaw in them. It's the reason they're actually useful as a measuring stick. None of this means it's time to stop paying attention either. Some of these 7 signs are genuinely fragile. A job loss, a medical emergency, a market downturn can undo more than one of them in a single bad year. Being ahead right now isn't the same as being permanently safe. It's just a more accurate starting point than the vague sense of probably behind most people are carrying around without ever checking. If this is the kind of thing you think about, stick around. That's basically what this channel is. And before you go, how many of these 7 signs describe you right now? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone.